Welcome to Partner Growth Advisors, maximizing Microsoft's licensing changes. How can partners boost revenue with the death of the current EA structure? Presenters today are myself, Jake Johnson, and Keith Keeler from Partner Growth Advisors. I'm going to start the day off with Microsoft licensing evolution and market shifts. So Microsoft had their EA, right? And they've made changes to it throughout the years in allowing people of various sizes to enter into an enterprise agreement, and have slowly been paring it down and getting rid of certain quantity of seats from that EA to pare down their responsibility. So what does that change? What does that shifted in the market currently in November with the death of the current version of the EA? So really, there's a new licensing reality, and Microsoft is making a large push for sub 5,000 seat companies to potentially move to CSP. And they're looking at it through the lens of Microsoft, not necessarily the partner or the customer. To the customers, they're saying this is great, we can transition you off of the EA, and Microsoft is going to try to move them to the Microsoft Cloud Agreement Enterprise. So the MCAE, either at their renewal time or shift them to a partner with CSP. Now, granted, Microsoft is going to try to keep as many of those larger accounts on an MCAE as they possibly can, and shift all of the very small ones that really don't transact with Microsoft very much over to a partner. That will be their strategy. They're already doing that as well. But it really gives a change in the competitive landscape to smaller partners that do transact CSP. You're going to have better access to gain leverage into accounts that you were previously unable to access and sell licensing into. So now you can compete with those traditional large account resellers, the LARs that held the paper on those enterprise agreements, and go and transact that CSP revenue, which is great. It's a great opportunity for partners to go gain that MRR from that CSP licensing. But it also really allows those smaller partners to do, if you built a solid practice within security, modern work, Azure, depending on what it is, to go and drive your services along with licensing into those larger organizations. It also allows you to drive more support opportunities and MSP or MSSP services attached to those licenses. So on top of all of that, a lot of these people coming off their EAs, there's a lot of bloat within an EA. Microsoft gave them a larger discount because they said, okay, great, you buy this many licenses of this, and we'll give you a bigger discount. And so they took that because they thought it was saving them money, when in reality, now this transition, it is going to cost them an arm and a leg, because those discounts that they had on their EA are going away. And so now, as you move them, is a great time to look at optimizing that license landscape for that client, which is also a big value add as a partner to go in and say, hey, I can save you $20, $30, $50, $100,000 over this year, over the next 2 years for an organization. And Microsoft has said, we're going to add in, this portal on MCAE, and clients can self-manage their licenses and do all these things and make their changes to all their licensing through this portal. If anybody thinks that that is a wonderful idea, I don't know if you've seen any of Microsoft's portals, but clients have enough trouble making sense of their licensing as it stands. They're all constantly contacting their partner about licensing and what they should switch to, allowing them to self-manage we don't believe is a great option. So there's value there as well in having that knowledge to get the right license to your client and answer questions that they have about it. And with the new changes Microsoft just announced in license mobility for Windows and SQL Server through CSP into Azure, you can play in the server realm as well. So it's not just their modern work licensing on CSP. Now it's server as well with that mobility and being able to take all of that license environment internally to yourself or Dynamics, whatever it happens to be. The biggest challenge that you're really going to face from this is Microsoft is already having conversations with these companies about MCAE and transitioning them over. Now, the thing that is really important to remember is they're going to transition them at renewal date. So it wasn't November 2025. Every EA just, went in the trash. It is every time they come up for a renewal, not a true up, a renewal, that Microsoft will transition them over. Potentially a true up too. Microsoft makes its own rules, so they could make those changes at any time. But start having the conversation now to rebuff that. Or as a different strategy, find out who the Microsoft team is, understand what their priorities are, and help them understand that you're there to help support them and win some of the CSP business and work with them, on finding the best solution for the client. The other part is partners are already having conversations with clients about the transition. So it is going to be a war of attrition out there. Whoever can get the most people coming off of their EA that aren't going to MCAE to CSP, every partner is trying to get that revenue and that licensing and access. So the partners who have the most value to add and bring the best story to market about how they can add that value are going to win. Now I'm going to hand it off to Keith Keeler.
Great, thanks a lot, Jake. The next section that we're going to cover is indirect providers and partner consolidation strategies. So as a Microsoft partner, you may already be involved in the Cloud Solution Provider program and working with an indirect provider to help you facilitate transacting your end customers' cloud services, whether it's Microsoft 365, modern work, security, or Azure consumption. And so as you think about the indirect providers that are available, it becomes really important, and you may to consider which indirect providers bring the most value to your organization, which translates into that end customer experience that you're managing, that relationship that you have with the end customer. And you may be working with several indirect providers. And part of what we're looking at here is, considering consolidating indirect providers into one indirect provider that you work with. Now, some key evaluation factors in reviewing and interviewing, if you will, the indirect providers that are available are what type of resources are they bringing to the table to support your organization? So think about automation tools. What do they have built into their platform to simplify the process of provisioning, billing, implementing cloud services through that CSP program for you and your end customer? What level of expertise do they have in the CSP program and model? How long have they been in the indirect provider program supporting partner organizations just like yours? Other considerations in reviewing indirect providers: what level of support, SLAs, do they deliver? Tech support, billing support, how is that managed to help your business? And part of looking at these indirect providers is also simplifying operations, which in turn leads to profitability. And so, as you're probably aware, from a licensing point of view, Microsoft 365 or Azure consumption, there's not a whole lot of profit margin that's associated with the licenses. So can that indirect provider simplify operations for me that will then in turn take advantage of the profit margins that are built into the licenses? Also think about what incentive programs and how those indirect providers manage funding programs that are available to position with your customer, with your end customer. And what does that process look like? And so as you look at the indirect provider landscape, and as I mentioned, you may be working with multiple, it's already. It's also a consideration of consolidating. And what are some of the benefits in consolidating into one indirect provider? Well, there is, a conversation to be had about increasing, buying power as far as taking the revenue that might be with multiple indirect providers and bringing that to one organization, right? The other things that I mentioned are, reducing administrative overhead, right? So simplifying that operations process. And the other thing to take into consideration that I didn't mention previously is enablement for your organization. So what programs do indirect providers bring to your organization to help your sellers position and sell cloud services and solutions with your organization? So what training programs are available for sellers as well as your engineering organization people, whether it's pre-sales solution engineers, right? Or if it's implementation and the engineering team that does the work once a customer moves forward with a project. And so that becomes super important at the same time. So kind of some food for thought and some questions. What are you getting today from your indirect provider relationship? Does it make sense? Are they adding value to your business? Not just from a technical features and benefits point of view, but truly, how are they adding value to help you grow your business as a whole? How are your current providers adding value, right, to the business, but also your client experience? So how are the indirect providers helping you support your end customer, whether it's billing, whether it's technical? And then how many of your providers' services are you taking advantage of? So a lot of the indirect providers have professional services that are available that you can position that might fill a gap in your organization. And so, project-based services or professional services are available from a lot of the indirect providers to help support the success of a project and implementation. So I think if, we think about some of those considerations, that leads into support changes with and customer expectations with the changes that went into place November of last year and the enterprise agreement, the EA, right? And so as Jake mentioned previously, there's the action, right, or the compelling event is at renewal. Those changes take place. And so, Jake, if you kind of want to move on to the next one.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. So now let's talk about what is the reality of this transition over to CSP. And another reason, what I feel is, and we have talked about internally here for quite a while when they first announced it, what is Microsoft really getting out of this? Well, they're transitioning people over, and it's supposed to provide more value in this portal for clients, and keeping that direct billing relationship is one part of it, but a large portion of this is support. If you look at where Microsoft has cut headcount, there have been a fair amount of support people that have been let go. And part of that is, this transition over to CSP. Microsoft has now placed the burden and responsibility of that tier one initial support on partners. And as they're pushing these clients over to CSP, now you as the partner are going to be responsible for this, right? So Microsoft has been able to, save large quantities of money by reducing headcount and still maintaining their profit margins with software. So I feel like that's a less talked about piece of why this transition is happening as well. So what does that mean? Now you're responsible for support with CSP, right? All of that's now going to fall on you no matter what it is. So if you're selling that license through CSP, whether it's a Dynamics license, Windows Server, SQL Server, Modern Work license, security license, whatever it happens to be, now you as the partner are responsible for that. And Keith talked about that a little bit in the indirect provider model. If you are going through an indirect provider, what is that indirect provider helping you with? Are they helping you with that support? A lot of them do. We have thoughts on who has the best model and who provides the best support. So feel free to reach out to us, with some recommendations on who some of those distributors are as well. But it also provides partners the opportunity to really provide fantastic support and client experience to these net new clients that they're winning through CSP. And how do you differentiate? How do you find net new opportunities? A lot of it is through support. You understand what your clients' needs are through support. Hey, they're getting this, this, and this. Maybe we should look at a project to remedy that or modernize this as well. So really being able to provide and engage in net new opportunities and drive additional revenue is a key component that comes out of support. So it's not necessarily a bad thing for you as a partner either. You just need to be able to meet that support threshold and that need for the client. So you are responsible for that 24/7 coverage, which Keith mentioned as well in the indirect provider. A lot of them do have that 24/7 support that they offer for clients that go, or partners that go through them for their CSP in the indirect model. And then, adopting the ITIL processes. So giving clients self-service portals, AI workflows, right? As we talk about the age of AI and Microsoft, wanting everybody to be frontier. Do you have an AI solution that helps reduce support tickets or triages support as well? So it's an opportunity for you as a partner to get deeper into the AI space and really provide excellent support. So what are the answers out of this, right? So what are the strategic actions you can come up with, and some key takeaways that we hope you found, from our webinar today? And I'm going to hand back over to Keith Keeler, talk through those.
Perfect. All right. So as we think about how we engage and support end customers through this transition period from enterprise agreement to the cloud solution provider program, CSP, there's definitely a way to think about a process in engaging that end customer and really owning that relationship. And what's interesting is you may already have a relationship with an end customer where you've delivered and have been delivering professional services or managed services for years. However, that customer has always had an enterprise agreement in place. Perfect opportunity to go back to that customer where you already own that relationship and help support and guide them through the transition from enterprise agreement to CSP. And it may be likely that your customer who has had an enterprise agreement for years may have those deeper discounts, level C or level D discounts, or maybe even negotiated some, one-off deeper discount. All of that is going away. And so that customer will renew at level A, which is the least amount of discount that is available. And so before I go through this light framework, a partner action framework that we put together, I'd like to give you an example of how this transition from volume licensing programs, which the enterprise agreement is one flavor of a direct licensing agreement between the customer and Microsoft through the large account reseller or licensing solution partner model. So we worked with an MSP, so Partner Growth Advisors. We work with Microsoft partners to help them accelerate revenue, improve profitability, and increase visibility with Microsoft, and specifically the Cloud Solution Provider Program. And so how we do that is to have a licensing conversation with the partner and their end customer, and it drives services revenue for that partner. So we worked with an MSP and their end customer. The end customer is roughly in that 200 to 500 person organization range. And they had a volume licensing agreement in place. They felt like they were out of compliance with Windows Server and SQL Server on-prem. So the partner engaged us. We have licensing consulting engagements where we position the statement of work with the partner, and it creates a new revenue stream around licensing consulting engagements for that partner. And we have Microsoft licensing delivery resources with 25 plus years experience. Why I'm framing this for you is the partner was not transacting any licensing with this customer. And so we reviewed the server licensing, optimized it. The customer realized $100,000 in cost optimization. However, the customer was $180,000 out of compliance. So the partner had an opportunity to transact the server licensing through the CSP model and program to help reduce that risk, compliance risk with the end customer. At the same time, the end customer was happy with the process and made a decision to move their current Microsoft and Office 365 Modern Work licenses to this partner through the CSP program. Now, the end customer and the partner already had a 36-month roadmap that they were working towards to move the on-prem server infrastructure environment to Azure. And as a result of this licensing engagement model and process, the customer asked the partner to move that timeline from 36 months to migrating the data center and the infrastructure to a 12-month process. So it shortened that cycle, which is great for the customer. They're going to realize the benefits faster, and the partner now has an opportunity to capture that Azure consumption faster. So as a result, the partner realized the licensing through CSP, Azure consumption, and services project work in a faster timeline. So professional services to migrate that environment, as well as wrap in security services and also managed services. So to manage the environment ongoing. And so what that did was it really built the trust with the end customer and will also create future engagements around AI solutions, positioning that partner as a frontier organization, and also positioning the customer to take advantage of AI solutions as a frontier organization, as an end customer. And so as you've been looking likely at this framework, it's about navigating the licensing transition. So having that conversation with your end customers as it leads up to renewal. And if you're not having that conversation at least 90 days out from renewal, you have to act pretty quickly. And it's not like it's a complicated conversation. And there are resources that you can lean on to go jointly have that conversation. It's just a good timeline to, at a minimum, start that conversation out 90 days out from the renewal. And so in that example that I gave, naturally, partner organizations they like to lead with services that will implement an overall solution to drive business value for the organization. So licensing leads to that services conversation, whether it's a migration, app modernization, right? Innovation, and leading into managed services, as well as thinking about how do I go to market? How do I wrap a solution together that bundles in other service offerings to deliver a holistic service and solution to the end customer? And so that also leads into a concept of optimizing partner relationships. And so I know we're talking today about Microsoft. So you as a partner organization in your relationship with Microsoft. And we covered, the indirect provider model as it relates to the supporting the CSP program and simplifying that for you and your end customer. But really, when you think about optimizing partner relationships, it's not only evaluating the indirect provider to drive automation, scalability, co-selling, right, to strengthen your position in the market. It's also about, hey, as I go to market, Microsoft's pushing me to do different things from a product point of view. And how do I go to market with Microsoft's latest shiny object, right? Do you have the resources internally to support that from an engineering point of view? Support, so end customer support, break fix, if you will. And then also marketing and go to market. Do I have those resources internally to actually go and do that? And if the answer is no, that's okay. And building that muscle internally might not be the best choice for you today. And there are ways where you can build partner to partner relationships where you can stay in the conversation about the new shiny object with your end customer and have a partner resource on your arm to go and deliver that holistic service and solution with you owning that end customer relationship and having a delivery team to go and do that through partner to partner relationships. And so as you think about these licensing changes, it's about education. It's also about migration. And using the term migration, it's migrating from the legacy volume licensing agreement structure, specifically enterprise agreement, EA, to CSP. and helping that customer through that transition. So being confident that you have the resources, either internally or partner resources, to sit with the customer, have that conversation about the changes that Microsoft has made specifically with the enterprise agreement, how that could financially impact their organization, right? So the deep discount's going away. And so what does that look like in a future roadmap so that the customer is optimizing their licensing, only buying what they need, implementing what makes sense for their business and will drive business value, and creating that 12, 24, 36-month roadmap with that customer so that you can support them, not just with licensing, but then that builds that services opportunity, professional services, managed services, app dev, application modernization, all of it. So as we think about wrapping up and moving on to the next slide, some key takeaways and questions to consider. Is your practice positioned to take advantage of these changes? Do you have the internal resources to go sit at the table with your customers, advise them on, hey, here are the changes that are coming up for renewal. Here's a process that we have in place that can help support making that a smoother transition. What will the expectations be from your customer? So think about the questions, concerns that your customers may have in making these changes. And in some cases, it's not a question about, if I should make the change. It's when am I going to make the change? How can I do that confidently? And who can support me? So it's thinking about, the expectations that your customers will have with you as you help them, from advising them on the changes, but then implementing those changes when it comes to the licensing program, and building that confidence with the customer that may be new customer to you, or it may be a customer that you've done business with around their Microsoft environment for the last 10, 15 years. How do you address the differences between the changed CSP? Some of it's pretty straightforward as far as the discount levels going away. It's also an opportunity for you to position your differentiators, how you add value to the customer's business in jointly owning that licensing relationship with your customer through CSP. It also provides you an opportunity to, if they're coming off of C or D level discounts, how do you mitigate that risk? Well, Jake had mentioned that a lot of the enterprise agreements are bloated because they may have had an account manager from Microsoft in the past that said, oh, hey, just take the biggest bundle, most expensive bundle, and license everybody for it, whether they need it or not. That's a reality. So anyway, how do you help your client mitigate that risk? And that's where license optimization engagements come into play, right? And having the right resources to confidently look at a customer's licensing structure and say to the customer, okay, so let's talk about how we can structure a different mix, which will optimize the environment, may or may not provide cost savings, but at least confidently you have the right licensing mix based on your future roadmap and what individuals in your organization actually need, instead of having a type of license where they use 3 out of the 15 things that are included within that license. And so when you think about your existing client base and or prospects that you may have in the pipeline, have you asked them the question in the past, what type of Microsoft volume licensing agreement do you have today? Is it an enterprise agreement? Is it an MPSA? And it's been so long, I forget what the acronym MPSA stands for. But they may be an organization that has what's called a server provider license agreement. So they're hosting a infrastructure environment and they built a software application that they are selling to other customers in the market. And so that's an opportunity to look at moving that SPLA agreement to CSP. And a MAC agreement is a financial commitment that the customer has made to Microsoft for their Azure consumption. And so having a conversation with the clients or prospect about the changes and how CSP could be advantageous for them is really a perfect opportunity for you as a Microsoft partner and either that existing client or prospective client to position yourself as that trusted advisor from licensing, but also services that you can bring to that company and owning that relationship end to end with your client. So previously I'd mentioned, what we do at Partner Growth Advisors and supporting the Microsoft partner ecosystem. So we're here to help support you to increase revenue, improve profitability, increase visibility with Microsoft. And we do that through various contracted roles, fractional headcount. But then also I had mentioned the licensing optimization consulting engagements. That's an opportunity for you as a partner. And so we're here to answer questions and see if there's opportunity where we can go to market together to help you provide that success to your end customers. So, Jake, wrap it up.
Yeah, wanted to open up the floor for any questions that you may have regarding the changes to CSP or licensing in general, and ways that you can take advantage, or questions that you have about Partner Growth Advisors, who we are, what we do, and how we work with partners, like Keith mentioned, to provide that licensing help. All of the help that we provide is actually co-op eligible. So you can use your Microsoft Monopoly money from co-op to engage with Partner Growth Advisors.